On Thursday, the Las Vegas Stadium Authority met and approved a whole bunch of documents for the A's. We saw that the price tag went up from 1.5 billion to 1.75 billion. What was your overall take of that meeting, and are they making actual progress over there in Las Vegas? Would you say?
I mean, they're, I guess, headed in the right direction in that they actually got some documents signed. They weren't documents that particularly said anything, right? It was just, I can find money if I need to. My family's got money. Um, but I mean it's still sort of, I forget what the I used on my website, shambles ahead, something like that.
Yeah.
It's still sort of gradually creeping forward. It hasn't stalled out yet. But still, we've got the same question, which is that John Fisher now needs, well over $1 billion. And yes, it's true. His family could sell $1 billion worth of stock and then he'd have $1 billion. But does it make any sense to do that? And he still hasn't answered that question.
Yeah, I feel like one win that I'm taking from this is I'm proud to know that he has utterly failed at finding anyone other than Goldman Sachs, who's writing him an extremely high interest loan or whatever, but really found anyone who's willing to invest with him. So, at the end of the day, if he ends up being able to build the stadium, it's looking like it's going to cost him the absolute maximum amount of money.
Yeah, I can't really think of any examples of sports team owners who have found private investors who are willing to put up a lot of money towards
Yeah.
a project, right? I mean, sometimes you'll find somebody who's willing to pre-buy the naming rights or, something else like that. So, buy a chunk of the revenues. But, typically when you're asking people to invest at, hundreds of millions of dollars, they want to get something in return, oddly. I think that I'm not at all surprised this is the way that it's been going. I, didn't expect to see a rush of people wanting to, buy 25% of the Oakland A's at the $2 billion valuation so that they could own a part of the Las Vegas A's, right? Along with a whole lot of stadium debt. So, nothing surprises me so far. I'm not quite sure what the end game is here. I mean, like that's the question, right? Is at some point Fisher has to either say, okay, we're breaking ground. I'm, putting up the money for this thing, or he has to do something else. And there's no real deadline, for him to do that. But eventually, it's going to be too late for him to open a stadium even by 2029. Then you're talking about another year in Sacramento. I don't know. It just seems like kicking the can further and further down the road and hoping that something is going to happen. I'm not sure what he's hoping for.
Yeah, that's the impression
Yeah,
I
I
get
mean,
too. Yeah, absolutely.
what like compared to, I mean, if we compared this to you've seen you followed closely so many more
Yeah.
projects. Like compared to the average project, is this sort of fact that you just submit this documentation saying, yeah, I got the money, I'm good for it, let's keep going. Is that pretty common, or is it uncommon? And are there any examples of projects that have sort of gotten to this point and then still fallen apart?
I think both, I think it's common for, a stadium authority that wants to see it continue to move forward to keep signing off on things and say, okay, as long as you're not backing out, we're not going to back out either.
Yeah.
At the same time, yeah, things fall apart at late dates for all sorts of different reasons. We saw the Los Angeles Angels stadium deal fall apart because their mayor was doing some, allegedly doing some light bribery. We saw just recently the Rays situation kind of seemingly fall apart, although it's unclear how long that's going to happen. Take all kinds of things happen. I mean, that's I always say every unhappy stadium deal is unhappy in its own way, and there are all sorts of different routes that they can take. So I mean, I think the one that probably is most um, comparable to the A's so far seems like Arizona Coyotes, right? Go play in a minor league facility and then cross your fingers and hope that something will work out for a new building. And that did not work out so well for the Arizona Coyotes, who are now in Utah. I have no idea what happens if the Vegas Stadium, if Fisher gives up on the Vegas Stadium, right? Does he
Yeah.
go back? Does he sell the team? Does he go back to Oakland himself? Does he try and stay put in Sacramento? Does he start shopping around for other cities, despite the fact that MLB wants to, keep those open for expansion teams? I really have no idea, and I don't know if he has any idea. I mean, this whole thing really smells like something he kind of stumbled into, right? He was mad about
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
being as lucrative as he thought, so he was like, "Oh, Las Vegas, that'll be great." And then, he managed to work out getting some money from Nevada and then didn't plan out the rest. Or if he did, he's not telling us how it's planned.
Yeah, because I anticipate that this price tag is going to rise again. I mean, even Steve Hill, the chairman of the authority board, he alluded to that too, that this is going to rise. I mean, as we know right now, it's 1.1 billion from the Fishers, 350 million in public money, 300 million in the loans. But I thought it was interesting. I was reading your blog that even as it's written right now, he would be on the hook to actually put up about 1.35 billion or so, right? And then he would recoup 220 million
Yeah, I think it's
from
something like that.
bonds or something like that.
He's getting
So
back money in tax breaks. Because it's 380 in actual public, upfront money. But then there's also about 220 in property tax breaks and entertainment tax breaks that he would get back later. So yeah, there's still, but whatever, it's over $1 billion, right? I mean, that's a lot of money to
yeah.
spend to build a stadium that holds 33,000 people in Major League Baseball's smallest market, and you still haven't actually proven that you can fit it on 9 acres.
Yeah.
It seems kind of nuts, right? But again, people have gone ahead with other things that seem nuts, and sometimes they've worked out, and sometimes they have completely not worked out. So I really don't know what to predict at this point. I
Yeah.
mean, I would not be surprised with almost any of those scenarios.
Yeah. And another thing I think is interesting too is that if the price does go up, seems like the A's are on the hook for that. Like that's written in the language. That's what Steve
Yeah.
Hill is saying. So I wonder if, I wonder how long John Fisher's going to pretend this fairy tale like, oh, like, oh, it's going to cost 1.75 billion because I think everybody thinks it's going to be closer to 2 billion, right? By the end of the day. So,
Possibly. I mean, we
yeah.
don't know what's going to happen with interest rates. We don't know what's going to happen with the construction labor market. We don't know what's going to happen with an awful lot of things after January 20th, among other things.
And what's the point of no return for you? Because I know that they have to throw down the first initial 100 million, I believe, of the project. Sandy Dean's already out here saying that they've already spent 40 million on the project. So, I mean, at one point, do you say, I mean, could you conceive a way where they maybe throw $100 million down without even getting to the construction phase?
Possibly, I don't
Yeah,
know. I mean,
yeah, yeah. So
I
many
don't,
questions.
I think anything really is fair game here. And again, it seems like Fisher's goal right now is to just keep all the balls in the air and hope that, somebody goes up with $1 billion check,
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
is not a great plan. I mean, again, it's possible that he has something, up his
Yeah.
sleeve that he's planning to do, but he does not seem like a brilliant tactician.
Mhm.
So I think it's more likely, Occam's razor says that probably he's just stumbled into this and doesn't know idea where he's going.
At some point, you don't have to be a brilliant tactician if you and your brothers have $2 billion from that you've inherited. So I fear or I kind of assume that still like by far the most likely outcome is that they're just going to end up having to cough up the entire amount of money, and they might have to sell a bunch of stock or whatever. But I think that they've committed to saying we're going to do this no matter what. There was news reports soon after the final game that Joe Lacob and had put together some package where he said, you can, here we'll buy the A's from you and we'll trade it for a quarter of the of the Warriors or something or all this other stuff. And apparently he just said, no, I'm just not interested. So I just feel like, yeah.
Nobody's gonna come after him if he changes his mind again, right? I mean, he did this with Howard Terminal, where he was like, "Okay, we're doing this," and then he said, "Oh, never mind, it's not gonna work," right? He could totally say, "Oh, sorry, it made sense. Las Vegas made sense, when we first approved it, but now things have changed. It's not gonna work. I'm going to sell the team, stay in Sacramento, any of a number of things,
Yeah.
play on a floating platform in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Um, really there's no rules here.
Yeah.
And yes, he's committed in the sense that he has said he's going to do this, but you know, when it comes time to actually putting up $2 billion, if it's $2 billion, it's a lot of money,
Yeah.
and I don't know if his family's going to be happy with that. I don't know if he's going to be happy with that. And oh, I said I'm going to do this. I guess I got to go ahead with it is
Yeah.
not really the way that billionaires tend to think, right? It's more, oh, if I don't want to do this now, what's my escape clause?
Mhm.
And he has to be thinking that right now, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's just the the only thing I can see that seems smart about this is he was stuck with having to lose revenue sharing if he stayed in Oakland, right? Because they kept going back and forth. MLB kept going back and forth about whether you could play in Oakland, and whether that's a major market, whether you could still get revenue sharing checks.
And the
And
TV deal as well. Yeah.
he's right.
Mhm.
So he's managed to keep the TV deal in Sacramento. He's managed to keep the revenue sharing in Sacramento, correct?
I believe so. Yes.
Yep.
And
Yes.
he'll keep that in Las Vegas. So, he can that's something that he gets as a freebie, but it's still not worth $1 billion, the revenue sharing money. So I really
Yeah.
don't. I can only say it so many times, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know what he's doing. I don't think anyone knows what he's doing. I don't know if he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
I think that I think that there's I just sort of always sort of assume the worst with this kind of stuff, and one of the ways that I think I understand what they're doing is that they have decided that despite being a really small market, Las Vegas is actually this amazing market, where the Raiders are making all this money from people coming and visiting and stuff, and Formula One wants to be there, and all these other things, and that they actually, they're getting in on the ground floor of, and frankly, like, it sounds like all of the money in sports right now is through, gambling, and the gambling, the gambling ads, and for until Congress decides to, crack down on the sort of all this, all this predatory gambling nonsense that is on people's phones, that's where everyone in sports business thinks the future of their business lies. And California doesn't have sports gambling. It's one of the few states where you can't bet on your phone still, and so there's none of that, and there's all of that in Las Vegas. So I think that's where he was walking around, Wall Street with this $2.5 billion valuation, being like, "Buy a piece of me, baby!" Like, this is secretly the most brilliant, business move anyone's ever made. And you know what? I mean, like, in 10 years, I wouldn't be completely shocked if that turns out to be the case. But I also, in 10 years, wouldn't be completely shocked if they never even open the stadium. So, yeah.
Right.